If you'd like to support 1,000 Words, head over to our Patreon, and for a few pounds a month, you'll get extra footage, behind the scenes, exclusive interviews, painting tutorials, time lapses, and a whole load of other stuff. Thanks for your support, and enjoy tonight's episode.
What we're currently living in is a different kind of faith, which is a Luciferian cult. I don't know how else to describe it because it's completely depraved. You can see now that we have reached this point of weaponry where you can destroy the world, that freedom is an illusion unless you reject it in its entirety. Everything that we're looking at every day is corrupted.
Would you describe yourself as a Christian?
Yes. I don't know why I hesitated there. But I mean, it's a strange thing, isn't it? In what way? So I'm asked all the time on those forms, describe yourself as this, that, or the other. And I instinctively never agree to sign any of them. So when you say, would you describe yourself as this, I'm thinking to whom, why, when, for what purpose?
Well, I suppose, in a way, that's why I'm asked the question, because it came up with Bob as well. How we define ourselves, what these words mean. So what does that word mean to you?
Well, it's interesting because, and I have talked about this, I read Tolstoy's essay on the law of love and the law of violence, and it's really changed my perspective on everything, because he says that the main point of Christianity is that there is never any justification for violence. And that bothers me because I can think of all of the different justifications for violence, and he goes through them and takes them apart. And you can see now that we have reached this point of weaponry where you can destroy the world, that freedom is an illusion unless you reject it in its entirety. So we've come further along the line of his argument where it's inevitable that he's right. And I spoke to my friend about this.
Flesh that out a little bit.
So I have no right to rule over you. Mm-hmm. My concern should be with myself.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't use force against you to make you do something that is not for me to make you do. Mm-hmm. And all rules of violence are just escalations of destroying that fundamental principle. And if you love your neighbour as you wish to be loved, or treat your neighbour as you wish to be treated, then there is no violence. And then all of the different arguments that you have for violence. And it's curious because my friend said, well, if someone came to my house and tried to do this to my child, then obviously I would defend them in this way. And he was talking about the state. But obviously if the state could come into your house and take your child away, then if you attack the agent of the state, it's not as if you're going to win, is it?
No.
So you're saying, actually, that the whole of society is just so destroyed that the state could come into your house, take your child, and that your only response would be to have an aimless, pointless physical attack against them. And I call it aimless and pointless because you couldn't possibly win. If it is at that stage where you have no defence that isn't physical and you're trying to take on the state with your bare hands, then it's a nonsense. The most you could achieve is to kill an agent of the state. So either you have... And then once you start looking at it from Tolstoy's perspective, you can't get around it. There's never going to be any...
Yeah, but with that example there, it doesn't have to be the state. If someone just came into your home, an individual came into your home and threatened you, then that would be a different matter, wouldn't it?
Well, probably not.
No?
Because then you're just arguing about weaponry, aren't you?
In what way? I mean, if you're just protecting your family, would that be classed as violence? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what his definition of violence is, so in that context.
I think
But surely self-defense is...
I think he's not talking about self-defense.
Yeah, okay.
And also, that is an interesting example because people use self-defense as an argument for violence. So he does use the example of, I see you raising a knife to someone else and I choose to shoot you before you use your knife. Mm-hmm. But I have no idea what you're going to do with your knife. Mm-hmm. So who am I to take your life? Because I think that you're going to do something. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, you would say that's not self-defense, that's a preemptive guess. That's something that's not for you to make a preemptive guess about. It's fascinating. Anyway, I was talking about it with my friend Patrick, and he said, well, that's just Christianity. And I thought, this is so bizarre, because a different friend had said, well, what we believe, isn't it, is that Christ is going to come back. And that's going to be there's going to be a second coming. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, this is really interesting, because... And then Tolstoy says that all of the stories are a nonsense. And
what stories?
The Christian stories, and he's a Christian. He says all of Christianity is about the law of love. Yeah. And all of the stories of the saints and miracles are just about church Christianity, which is a lie and a deception to consolidate power, and if anything, extend the rule of violence. Mm-hmm. So, and then I've been reading a lot about iconography and what it means to have to see something presented to you in such a way that it forces you to interpret it beyond the immediate material reality. So in the way that an icon extends the bodily form so that it's disproportionate to the head or is deliberately two-dimensional, that's because it's supposed to be taking you beyond the immediate surface appearance of things. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Western tradition of art, we've gone the other way. We've gone towards tricks of light and perspective to make things more and more realistic. And if anything, it's drawn us into the material aspect of something. It's gone in totally the opposite direction. And then the material, in fact, that's interesting too. But I was thinking about how these different interpretations of Christianity are not an argument about whether the Spirit emanates from the Father and the Son. They are fundamental arguments about whether there are miracles, whether Christ is an energy the energy of Christ came into Christ when he was baptized by John, or whether he was born of a virgin, or whether that's an analogy. So you say, are you a Christian? Yes, I am a Christian. And I see all elements of the story as having value, and I see the contradictions between them as being deliberate stumbling blocks so that you can't fall asleep in your faith. In as much as most of the realizations that we come to just enable us to stop thinking. So, okay, I believe in God now, so I don't need to think anything more about it. I don't need to develop anymore. I can just accept that that's fine, regurgitate in the orthodoxy I hear. I don't really need to think about that element of my life anymore. Or you see all of the paradoxes not as something to be denied or conflicted by, but just as different ways to look at the same thing, because your life journey hasn't stopped. So yes, I describe myself as a Christian, but what kind? I don't know.
How does that... Okay, so how does that term Christian serve you or anyone? If we're defining what that means, we have to define that word, don't we? And define what it means for it to be relevant in
So I believe
communication.
If every single religion takes you further towards your relationship to the infinite. Mm-hmm. So I'm a finite being and I'm going to die, and most people throughout all time have tried to understand themselves in the context of an infinite universe. Yeah. So all religion serves that purpose, and all of the great thinkers in all of the different faiths are trying to define in different ways the individual's relationship to the infinite. Yeah. And the purer the person is, the more likely they are to get closer to apprehending the truth, because they're going to be less obscured by their own desires and impulses. Sure. And have greater clarity. Okay, no, I'm totally with that. So that
makes sense.
and then I think,
How does that relate to? In that sense, could you call yourself anything? I mean, why call yourself a Christian or not just a?
well, because then after that point, so I was chatting to the chap on the corner, and he's a Muslim, and this is interesting because there's a very different writer called Ebola who says you've got to understand there are always people on earth who are maintaining that bridge with God. This guy on the corner, he said that there are, we were talking about the difference between Sufism and the Sunnis. And I said, well, the Sufis are more mystical. Is that the right way around? And he said, yes. The Sunnis think you have to have more rules. But anyway, he said that there are different levels, and they believe that there are 7 levels. And he said, but obviously we don't know about the people that get to the higher levels. And I said, yes, because I imagine that the second level probably involves giving up bragging. But I think that this is the same in all of the traditions. So what we're currently living in is a different kind of faith, which is a Luciferian cult. I don't know how else to describe it, because it's completely depraved and it's completely about the ego, and every single development is only is a lie. It's all a self-aggrandizing lie that never acknowledges anything higher than ourselves and always thinks that everything should be erased to the most bestial elements in ourselves. So I can reject that, and then I can see that all of the major monotheistic faiths are trying to understand, because we're all equal, aren't we, before the infinite, and as much as we're all equally irrelevant. So
I don't think we're irrelevant.
no, I mean, we're all equally powerless in the faith, in the context of the Almighty. So it doesn't, if you have infinite God and you have little old me, it doesn't really matter if I'm taller than you or shorter than you. Relative to God, we're both insignificant, but I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, we're both equal, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're equally insignificant, and therefore we're equally significant.
Yeah.
So we have equality, but not in that strange, generic levelling down kind of way.
No, I'm with
And
you
then,
on that.
so why would I describe myself as a Christian? Because that's the story that makes sense to me. That's how I see things, even in the last few years.
When you say the story that makes sense to you, what do you mean by the story?
So, when all of this stuff started, and I thought it was so evil, it was because for me it was a rejection. It was the Antichrist. So when I was little, I used to live in a vicarage, and I'd go to the church, and we'd sing hymns. When I needed a neighbour, were you there? Were you there? I was cold. I was naked. Were you there? Were you there? And all of these things, we were doing the opposite of them. And it seemed to me that it was anti-Christ. It wasn't that it was just wicked. It was anti-Christ. So it was whatever Christ had said, pick up your pallet and walk. It was anti the teaching. So it wasn't just that it was, if you want to look at things in, Buddhism, you relinquish the self, don't you? And although you still end up in the same place, but for me, it was very specifically anti-Jesus Christ. It wasn't that it was, now you might say it was anti the Prophet Muhammad, but I'm not familiar enough with the teachings of Muhammad to know whether or not it was anti-Muhammad. All I know is it was anti-Christ. So, and I thought it was evil. So then I started to look at what had meaning for me and resonance for me, and it was the teachings of Christ. For example, love your neighbour like you love yourself. And also, if you have a child, obviously, as you do, if your child is sick, you help your child. Sorry, darling.
Within reason.
Of course, you have your portrait painted, in which case you leave them sweating on the sofa. Let me have that pizza. But anyway, but you don't mind if your child coughs in your face or whatever. And in that period, I know people that literally would lock their child up into a separate room in the house because they had a cold. Or
sure, I'm not denying any of that.
But all of those things, that my understanding of it was that it was anti a very specific teaching that I had as a child of my own volition when I had perfect faith. So I just went back to that teaching and it made sense to me. And then I knew this woman who I'd worked with. She was a booker, a promoter. And I once saw a Facebook thread that she had. And in this Facebook thread, she was saying that her neighbours had their grandparents over to play with the kids for this barbecue. And, how outrageous this was. And everyone was commenting. And she said, what on earth am I going to do about it? And I saw this way after the fact. And I would stop twitching on curtains. I'm not a witch. But anyway, by the end of this thread, because I had just read down it all, she had called the police on her neighbours for having this family barbecue. And which is obviously evil. And she was one of the first people to start sharing the stuff I was sharing. So I wrote to her and I said, but we both know, hi, how are you? I said, we both know this evil thing that you did. How is it that you did that evil thing and now you're sharing all of this stuff? And she said, well, I did that evil thing. And then after I did it, I started to think about what I was hearing and why I was being told it. And she basically, what happened was she was pricked by her own conscience. So she did something wicked and then her conscience rose up. And it made me think again of the crucifixion. So you have the mob and the mob choose, they're given a choice. You can kill the thief or you can kill the good. And they choose to kill the good on purpose, knowingly, just because it's the good thing. And then they kill it and then it rises up again. And that's because you can't actually kill the good. The second you try to kill the good, your conscience awakens and then the good is resurrected. So it was just how I started to understand everything. And I could see, if you looked at, they had this, these, when they were doing these little lockdowns, they had, this was around the time of their Halloween announcements when they were doing occult stuff, their 666 stuff. So they, every week they would have this, a leak. And then so they'd leak everything over the weekend, it would all be published. And then on the Monday, they'd have to have this emergency announcement and it would explain what everyone had adjusted to over the weekend. And then it got to October and they called their press conference on a Saturday, which was Halloween. So even though they always had a leak on the Friday, that they put in all the papers over the weekend, and then they had the press conference on the Monday, on the Halloween, they wanted the actual press conference on Halloween because they like occult stuff, like the Nazis did. But in that period, they had local lockdowns for Eid because you were supposed to not only think, oh, those Muslims are mixing and making us all sick, but it was also an attack on God. And then they wheeled out Ed Miliband as an ostensible Jew to say before Rosh Hashanah that you had to call the police on your neighbours if they got together because that was the Jewish New Year the next week. And then they had the national lockdown before the Festival of Light, the Diwali Hindu Festival of Light. So you could say that it wasn't just anti-Christ, it was anti-everything, but it was definitely anti-God. And I grew up a Christian.
So you're saying that, essentially it's just because that was your cultural upbringing.
Well, I was brought up as an atheist, but I've read about other faiths and I know people of other faiths. I just don't believe them. And I don't know how you understand faith. So you just have it or you don't. So there's, I don't know if you've read the Bhagavad Gita.
Not all of it.
But what I mean is that I can read these stories and I can see that the purposes that they have, but they're not what makes sense to me. Even if they're trying to take me to the same place, that's not how I can get there. That doesn't make sense to me. So I can understand that you might be, I believe, obviously, that if I met somebody who had reached the highest level of purity in meditation and self-renunciation, that they're obviously closer to the good than I am, because I'm very far from it in all of the ways that I'm sitting here banging on about myself. It's also vain and it's all vain. But I understand that people have totally renounced themselves. They've renounced all of their needs, and they obviously are closer to something than I am. And in that respect, I don't think that people are going to a different place. I'm not of the belief that someone is going to be condemned to hellfire because they have a different path to the same God.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't expect you to.
But that's not my path.
Yeah. Yeah,
and I think for me, if I'm looking at the teaching or comparing it, even though I can see a million discrepancies within one branch of one element of one faith. So even if you just read Philokalia, which is the Eastern Orthodox religious teachings, really interesting, but they're different. They're different. But I think that they can all teach me something and I understand them. And I'm not an Orthodox. And I'm not a Catholic. I go to an Anglican church in Pimlico when I can persuade my children to go with me. What would you describe yourself as?
If I had to describe myself as anything, I suppose just a truth seeker.
See, this is another thing. I have these strange dreams, not to go on about this too much, but that's the answer that comes to me in my dreams.
What? Christianity? Christ.
Yeah.
Well, that's better reason than all the crap you said before that.
I know, I don't know,
No, I'm joking. But...
I'll work out how to talk about it one day, but I don't know how to.
No, sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I find it really interesting. I kind of agree with, I don't know if that's the right word, agree with, but what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me. I just always struggle with that point where you jump in bed with a ism or a anity or a... it's like I said to Bob, I don't see the relevance of that word almost.
Well, for example, I think the restrictions, and I'm interested in restrictions, so I think that there are two different kinds. There is the kind where you're very keen to keep something the same, but nothing stays the same. It's always moving. So when you try and keep something the same, it tends to either stagnate or go backwards, or it goes forwards in a perverted direction. I don't think you can contain something just because you're at a point which is satisfying to you. So I can come up with all of the rules in the world to try and keep you in this exact position right now because it's pleasing to me and I've just reached it and I want to stay here. Or I can understand that energy is a flow and that things have to keep moving. But having said that, I also do believe in restraints. So I think that the more restraints that we have, the more we can achieve. And I don't mean those being external restraints that come from somebody who's trying to stop your movement. I'm talking about being able to overcome your own weaknesses.
Yeah.
To
self-discipline.
Yeah, to get to a higher level. And I think that our perception of self-discipline has been corrupted. So we think self-discipline is the opposite of what it is. So we're presented in advertising self-discipline. Oh, don't eat biscuits, and then you can look more attractive in this hot bikini and improve your OnlyFans revenue. Everything is an obfuscation of what you're trying to avoid, which is gluttony or adultery or whatever it is that you're in the. If you're trying to discourage whoring. The way we're encouraging things in our society would be, there's nothing wrong with it. It's all great. All you have to do is, eat less biscuits or take this diet pill. So everything that we're looking at every day is corrupted. It's not, everything is upside down. And I think that you need restraints, and that the more restraints that you have, I think that all of those rituals and restraints are a way to get to the bottom of the ladder, so that you can move beyond yourself.
Defiance Records, bringing you the best music from the movement. Remises never give up.
and Mad Mix's You're So Right, available now as a double A side on Defiance. And Raw Milk Conspiracy bringing purpose back to music with their latest single, This Is England 2024, and their brilliant debut, Misinformation Hall. Plus, now is a fantastic Ballad of a Toolmaker song from Trevor John. All available from Defiance Records, the Freedom label.
He did what he was told to do back then, and that's how he got in number 10.
Yeah, so much of what you said makes a lot of sense to me. But my concern is that perhaps in a similar way to what I call the pendulum swing that we have with, say, woke and then Trump, this kind of pendulum thing where the public opinion sort of it bounced backwards and forwards and we go from one to the other. I feel that religion is another one of those pendulum mindsets, or a kind of psyop. That would be my sort of take of it.
So I think it's the opposite. I think that you are going to die, and the world is going to continue, and that is a fact, and that's not a psyop.
No, I'm not. That's not. But religion.
But all religion is just an explanation of your relationship to that fact. So you have a purpose and you have a conscience and you have an idea of things, and you're going to die. Mm-hmm. And other things are going to continue. And you're small. And what is your relationship to things that are bigger than you?
Yeah.
That's called religion. So I agree with you that you can deny that fact to people for years. And really all that's happened is that the vainest, most hubristic, ignorant people that could only see what was immediately in front of their nose and could never see the big picture were given too much attention when that's what they wanted anyway. Mm-hmm. And when you give anybody attention, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be because they've had their eyebrows tattooed. I actually was talking about this the other day because I saw this happen in real life. But you can do something disgusting, like tattoo a woman's eyebrows on or give her a fake mouth. But just the nature of giving that person attention changes everybody's perspective on that horrible thing. Mm-hmm. So we gave people that should have been dismissed for their vacuity and for their shallowness and their self-interest. They should have had no interest for anybody else, and instead they were given masses of attention, called geniuses and lauded, and that so that deliberately directs people away from the ultimate question that's always preoccupied everybody in every single generation, which is what is their relationship to the infinite. Mm-hmm. But obviously, when you try and work that out, and it becomes a religion, that also then has lots of rules. So let's take it on a really simple, basic level. I understand that there is something bigger than me, that I'm small, that therefore I should be looking up and improving myself instead of looking down and wallowing in my own. So I then look at my weaknesses and I try and conquer them, and I master those weaknesses. And when I master them all, when I mastered them all, I get to a different level where I have greater clarity. Yeah. Now, other people, if I'm living my life right, could see that example and could then say, well, these seem like good rules to follow because then you can get to this place. And then they have that set of rules, and this is just me and my cult of one. So then they have this set of rules. They say, well, if you don't eat between 9 and 4 and you pray between 6 and 7, and you clean between 8 and 9, then by Friday, you'll have written 3 paragraphs, have a clean house, and you'll have lost 2 pounds. And then they build up a whole way of living based on that. And then different people preoccupy themselves with what they're good at. So some people want to enforce the rules, police the rules, punish people for not following the rules. Other people want to rebel against the rules and interpret them in their own way. And other people want to just conform to the rules, and that's now their style of living. But it doesn't change the fact, the initial fact, is that I realized I'm smaller than something bigger than me, that I'm mortal and something else is infinite, and that if I try and master myself in these different ways, I might get closer to the truth of that infinite thing. So it's...
Yeah, but I completely agree with that whole sentence, but I just don't see where religion comes into it.
Well, but all the religion is the different ways people have had of trying to reach the truth. So, and the difference between someone like me who has faith in something bigger, so the Jews took us closer to monotheism. In fact, that's the first monotheistic religion, is it not? And whereas the Greeks celebrated the body and the
Well, Judaism originally wasn't monotheistic, was it? That's the whole interesting story about the Old Testament and how they chose Yahweh and...
Well, the whole idea isn't of Abraham not sacrificing Isaac. If you're moving towards monotheism, that's what the Jews believe in one God, and then you end the Babylonianism.
Yeah, Yahweh demanded...
a jealous God. So yes, but all of these things are taking us closer to the truth. And then different faiths too.
Well, are they? I mean,
well, yes, I'm not a pagan. So you could look at it in a different way, whereas you've always had three different ideas, and this is from Confessions actually. So you have the idea of, here is the world, how can I improve my situation in the world? That's one version of paganism, me. Then you have another version, which is, here I am in the world, how can I improve my place in the world? And I identify myself with the community. So I'm now basically a state, and I'm trying to raise up my whole state so that we can all improve ourselves in the world. But these are all selfish things with a finite remit. And then the other version is, this is my relationship to the infinite, to which I should submit myself. And what I should do is see myself as an instrument of God and fulfill a higher purpose than myself and a higher purpose than my community.
I agree with that.
So that
I still don't see where religion comes into it.
No, but that's what religion is. So everybody has three. Okay, so you're just choosing to. So basically, you're either a pagan, as in this is for me and this is finite, and how can I improve myself, or I'm in a state and how can I improve my group, or how can I be an instrument of something greater than me to which I submit. But all I call religion is the sort of ways of life around one of those three schools of thought. So Tolstoy would say that all we have now is we've just gone back to paganism and we're calling it progress. So instead of being an instrument of something greater than ourselves, we've just called, progress is how we raise the group, which is just going backwards to paganism and calling it going forwards. But so it doesn't. When I don't know what you mean by religion, because I think we're describing different things.
Well, religion for me comes from the word to follow. So you're following a religion. It's like you have a set of rules that you have to follow, but it's not based on your intuition or your communion with the divine. It's something written or expected, and you have to fulfill that in order to be called a whatever you choose.
Yeah, but so I think then we're agreeing, but probably...
I can tell we're agreeing, but But basically I'm saying, absolutely, I'm not a pagan in either of those two first ways. Yeah. I would consider myself... the third way, and which I would call Christianity. That would be...
For me, because I would consider that the greatest advance philosophically or theologically for me, that seems closer to the truth for me. So, all people, and you can take religion out of it, all people everywhere have some kind of way of living. They just do. So you can't say, oh, so-and-so follows such and such, therefore that's what puts me off. Because everybody has some sort of list. Maybe you're saying that you don't think someone should be killed for feeling differently, or I don't know what your problem is with there being an idea written down. Because you cannot be a follower of one idea being written down, because so many have been written down. You could take one parable from the Bible and have 1,000 different interpretations of it. So
I'm not saying we need anything written down.
But then you have an oral tradition.
Well, I don't necessarily think we need anything external to our relationship with the divine. So I think it's an individual.
But then, so you have your individual journey, and are you allowed to describe it?
Yeah, of course.
So if you describe it and someone likes what you say, they might write it down.
Yeah, but they wouldn't become a Jakeist or just because they
But you don't. But that's all of the teachings of the Desert Fathers, or the Philokalia, or the saints, or.
Oh, I'm not saying there's not value in all those teachings. I mean, but there's hundreds and hundreds of accounts of people who've experienced what they would describe as the divine, that they experienced timelessness and
Yes,
absolute inner peace and an understanding of life that is eternal. But they come from all different faiths, and some of them have no faith. They would say it's just an experiential thing that they've connected.
I would think that they were wrong. The people that
Well, it depends on your word. It depends on your definition of the word faith. But they didn't have a religion, but they experienced those things in a very similar way to those who did have a religion. I mean, but
this is what I mean. I just consider it all about your relationship to the infinite.
Yeah, I do as well. That's why I'm asking, why do we need this confusing sort of messy term which means so much to do?
I don't think it is confusing. For me, it's people that have far...
But wars have been fought over these words, haven't they?
But I don't believe in war.
Yeah, but they have been fought over these words.
Yeah, of course, but people fight over all kinds of things. People fight over women, and people fight over money, and people fight over...
But if we didn't feel the need to define these things, then it would be less...
I don't agree with that.
Humans would be less likely to...
I think that that's a fraud. I genuinely think that that's a fraud. I think that not you.
No.
Not calling you a fraud.
No, yeah.
I think that it's a lie to suggest, we're hearing this all the time. It's a lie to suggest that someone who's contemplated something for 50 years and has wisdom that they wish to impart or share or elucidate for themselves or articulate for themselves, that you can choose whether or not to share. The principle of that thing, its existence, someone could fight over your painting. It doesn't mean that people don't need painting or to express themselves or communicate. If I abuse a principle, it doesn't make the principle wrong. So if I kill you for your watch, it doesn't mean that your watch is wrong. Your watch is still a perfectly good mechanism to tell the time.
That, was I?
Well, you are. You're saying that people have fought over these things, so you shouldn't have them.
Oh, no. I'm not saying because of that we shouldn't have them. I'm saying that they are I'm saying that's a symptom of an intrinsically flawed concept, i.e. that we have to give names to the things which are nameless.
But we do give names to things. That's the first thing we did. It's how we express ourselves. It's how we communicate. And by the way, the whole idea of, and this is the reason this is so interesting, is because this has been a whole movement in language. That there was actually a whole school of thought where they believed if you could take away the meaning from words, people wouldn't argue about them anymore. So a sort of New World Order version of the dictionary.
But I'm not saying that, though.
So if you empty something of meaning, then you can't have conflict.
But I'm not saying that.
So I don't know what you're saying then.
I'm talking about specifically labelling something which isn't, which
But labelling is just approaching clarity.
It is, yeah. But it can be. But you have to label it in a very careful way, to be a very accurate way. Where if you label something in an inaccurate way, it's going to lead to confusion and mess. So that's what I'm saying. Why do we need these terms to describe something which is so ineffable? To approach clarity and avoid confusion and mess. How does...
I just think that you avoid confusion and mess by getting closer to clarity, and you think that the more clarity you get to, the more likely you are to provoke war. I don't think calling our relationship with the divine, giving it a name such as Christianity, helps clarify it in the slightest. I think it completely confuses it because that term can mean so much to different people. I know, but I think it helps. No, so I think it immediately gives a term of reference to people, and then according to what they know or perceive of that, they can get closer. They could say, so do you are you a Western Christian or an Eastern Orthodox Christian? What do you think about the representation of Christ in images? Or do you think all of these things? So even look at iconoclasm. So do you think that an icon can contain Christ, or do you think that it's symbolic of Christ, or do you think that even such an idea is heretical and that you could smash up all of the images? Well, I don't believe in violence, but I do think that those arguments and those positions help achieve clarity. And I do think that they're hugely different, and I do think that they're worth considering. And I think that they're all interesting. And I don't think that I think to get closer to your understanding of something is aided and helped by lots and lots of descriptors that identify other fellow thinkers that are on your specific route to somewhere. Even if we're taking different paths to the same place, I cannot possibly become au fait with, sincerely, like I can have a superficial knowledge, of course. I can be superficial about Islam, Hinduism, Judaism. I can have a Starbucks mentality to everything. I can pop into my international airport, leave with a bunch of different scarves and a frappuccino and not know anything. But if I choose my path, I can get closer to I can move further along it by understanding what I'm not.
Yeah, there's that saying, isn't there? He who speaks does not know, and he who knows doesn't speak. Which kind of points to the inability of language really to say what's needed to be said.
Or articulates very neatly what expresses in language what you can't achieve if you're not an aesthetic. Because you just explain that with words, didn't you?
Yeah. I suppose the reason I find it worth talking about is because I think ultimately it doesn't serve humanity to use these words in the way that they're used. And I think it creates division. And
there is division, and division is good.
It creates unnecessary division.
Well, what is necessary unity?
Mutual understanding.
But how do you have mutual understanding if you choose not to know anything? That's what I mean.
Well, I'm not saying we shouldn't know it,
but I think an
anything.
I think an in-depth understanding of something comes from all of those teachings. I don't think it matters which ones you're following necessarily, but I think from going deeper and deeper and deeper into one thing, you get closer and closer to the truth. So I think, and I think that the closer you get to the truth, the less inclined you are to fight anyway. So that's fine with me.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
And I think that all of that language is vital, and I don't think that. So if you look at the very, very basic, a Sunni fighting a Sufi or I don't know when Christians last really fought each other in that way. Because it's not advertised, is it?
Well, Northern Ireland.
Oh, there you are. A football match in Scotland.
But so for the sake of argument, let's say, and I've put this to a Christian friend.
But also, what is really in Northern Ireland? Were the Protestants and Catholics in recent years fighting about religion? No, they weren't. They were fighting about territory, language,
Yeah, of course, it's another nonsense, agenda-driven political thing. Yeah, you're right in that sense.
But also, you do have differences of language and culture and style and dress. And I think we're getting further and further away from truth and difference by trying to hide it, and as if by making everybody equally shallow, you can have, John Lennon's that's a load of old this, his Imagine song.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm arguing for.
I don't really understand. I don't understand what you're saying.
I just don't see the need for that particular label, any kind of label. So I think all the things. So for example,
if you said, but it would be a lie for me to say that I don't have a teacher.
Well, that's okay. And what Christ is that what you mean? Christ?
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. We could talk for hours about religion.
And not really get any closer.
And
which is exactly what I'm saying, which is why I appreciate all the people that bother to write things down, try and clarify things for me that you think so evil. Frozen.
No, I don't think it's evil at all.
Clarity. You think clarity.
No, I just... Anyway, it's quite a complex
we should
discussion.
have started with that.
We could have done. So just to wrap up, do you want to just give us your thoughts? You were just telling me a little bit about your thoughts on the way the movement...
Oh, well, you asked earlier, didn't you, if I thought it would be enough just to have my own personal journey, or if I was worried about the end being nigh, small children. And I don't think that the end is nigh unless we bring it upon ourselves. And I think part of the issue is that everybody has a natural inclination to gossip, and we've turned away, the truthers have turned away from all of the celebrity stuff, but they haven't really, because I see people constantly saying who's actually a man or who's really, leaving their red shoes around or whatever it is. And it's just a more nefarious, gruesome, seedier type of gossip. And it hasn't left anyone less susceptible to the idea of heroes and there being a narrative that's accessible to them that actually has purpose for them and can help guide them anywhere. It's like and it's not about whether or not someone's controlled opposition. It's quite clear that someone like Trump and Musk are opposed to you. That is absolutely clear. That they're not, they are not even pretending to be on your side.
Yeah.
But everybody's controlled by their ego and their vanity.
Yeah.
And those are the things that, I'm so freezing. Those are the things that we can get over ourselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then we're all invincible.
Yeah. So, so if you were to just sum it up for people listening who might be struggling with what you just said, what would be your sort of guiding principle? How would you sum it up briefly, as a kind of words of advice in terms of a perspective on what's going on?
Build a life outside their story.
Okay.
That's it.
Nice.
Oh my God! It looks like me.
I don't know where you can see it.
It's very flattering, isn't it? My mother will love that. Bravo. You didn't make me look too depressed.
If you'd like to buy signed prints of any of the paintings from the series, you can go to jakefern.com or go to jakefern.co.uk to see my personal work. You can message me about the possibility of commissioning a portrait for yourself or a loved one. We also have Righteous Brothers work available in unlimited and limited edition prints. Perfect for anyone who wants the world to know what they think about what's going on.
The way that the religion was used to throughout COVID to manipulate people was just, it was heartbreaking, really. They were about to roll out the self-replicating vaccines, and they've got a company there called Arcalis. We're led to believe that, we get progressively sicker and sicker and sicker, and then we die eventually with, polypharmacy in our back pocket, loads of drugs, But the way to go really is to live incredibly healthy life and then decide one day, well, I think I'm ready now. I'm just going to sit under that tree and...
Yeah. If you'd like to support 1,000 Words on Patreon, please go to the link in the description. You get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes interviews and merchandise, as well as advanced news on up-and-coming episodes and events.